let's start with introducing yourselves.
Yes, my name is Tyler. I'm been in, I would call applied analytics space for 15 years, with finance departments, with accounting teams, with treasury teams, and now the last few years with HR, with workforce analytics, and I represent a company called Visier, which does workforce analytics.
Yes. My name is Björn Lorentzon, and I represent a company called Sympa. And I've been working with HR for 15 years or something like that in many different roles. And I have a wide background from different academic stuff for 7 years at university. And this is kind of sums it up when I'm landing here today, all the different things I've done. So people analytics is really something that is dear to my heart.
Yeah. And Tom?
Hi everyone, Tom Ricks. I've come from Qlik today. I'm a 20-year recruiter and moved into an analytics role about just over 12 months ago. I'm fortunate to work for a BI company, so that's where the analytics piece has transformed into my world, and super passionate about what business analytics, people analytics, analytics in general can do for a business to move it past kind of conventional reporting, what I term Excel, HR.
All right, so we're going to talk about, again, emerging innovations in people analytics. I want to start with you, Tyler. We talked a little bit, what are the industry trends? I want to start with this, and innovations that you're looking forward to in the future.
So if we think about innovations, this answer is going to sound very bland and very basic, but I think it's really important. It actually speaks to our previous speaker. I really appreciated something that he said. I had a conversation about 3 months ago with one of those HR gurus, somebody that we all know. We were talking deeply about people analytics. And he asked me a question, and it's really been on my mind. He says, how close are we going to be able to get people analytics to the frontline manager to really impact their job? He says, I see a lot of great things that are happening in the people analytics space, in people analytics teams, but how are we going to disseminate that to really change behavior of the frontline manager? And that's not easy to do, because you've got to get security, you've got to simplify information, you've got to push information, you've got to drive change management. And I'm really looking forward to the next 5 years, because I think we're going to see this shift from people analytics teams to now how do we drive behavior at the frontline manager. So I'm excited to see that.
Absolutely, I couldn't really agree with you more about this. I think that's the key, really. And I was thinking, Tom, what do you see any top hot topics and technologies out there that's really coming true?
So I think from my perspective, the really hot thing that I am working on right now is just bringing together data sources. In the previous presentation, we were seeing, where are our stakeholders within the company and what data do they have? When you marry that to our people data, to our employee data, it becomes extremely powerful. You're able to layer more and more information one on top of the other and really achieve some very deep insights as to your workforce productivities or achievements or talent measurements. So bringing data sources together is definitely one area. The second would be this holy grail of predictive.
Yeah.
Everybody seems to be talking about predictive.
And we are going to as well.
And we are going to as well. So that would definitely be kind of moving past the reporting.
Yeah.
And again, I can't believe Steve pretty much stole my whole presentation for later, but we'll get to that. Allowing people to self-service. Yeah. Something we were just talking about here, and moving past that reporting functionality into the prescriptive and predictive is definitely.
Again, just a follow-up question. Do you see any overhyped topics here?
Yes, predictive.
Predictive, yeah. It is, right? Even if everybody wants to talk about it, because of course we want to predict human behavior.
Yeah, it's... so again, without stealing thunder from later, the one question that I get is, do you have anything that predicts attrition?
Yeah.
So where in an organization are you going to lose your next employee? And I'm not sure I subscribe to that 100%, because when I look at attrition, people follow people.
Yeah.
And what you're trying to build is an analytics model that's predicting who knows who in the market. It's LinkedIn, right? What I'm more focused on is employee engagement. And if we can measure engagement of our employees over all of these different platforms of information that we have access to, what I want to start driving is using our highly engaged employees to drive behaviorally our less engaged employees, so that the people at the lower end of the engagement scale are feeling that they are part of something bigger, feeling that they have energy from somewhere else that's not just kind of being self-sufficient. I don't think that predictive analytics is ever going to stop people following people.
Yeah.
And that's the outlier, and that can happen anywhere in your business to any level of engaged employee.
Yeah. And Björn, do you have any examples of innovative analytics in this space that you can come up with?
Any examples? That's a good question. But yeah, I do. One simple thing that I work with Sympa, we're an HR system, and I implemented it at a large company, multinational industry. And when we were rolling it out, when we kind of made the first version of the system, we selected a few stores, because this was retail in Sweden, in London, to go ahead and use it. At the same time, we started using it at the head office, but for HR only. And I sat down at these long steering groups meetings for some completely other things, and I was pretty much not listening and doing other stuff in the system instead. And one of the managers leaned over like, "What do you have there?" I was, "Oh, this is a list or a report I'm building for birthdays." Yeah. So all the line manager can have a list of their birthdays in real time. She was, "I want that." So we actually didn't roll out the system to the managers. They asked us for it, because this kind of went viral in our little world. Yeah. So 100 managers came to me and asked, "I hear there's a list of birthdays. I want that." Because as
what do they want to do with it?
What they want to do with it is to avoid having all these Outlook or whatever calendar you use reminders that you have to update yourself and set who is turning 50 this year, who's doing 40, and then you have all these reminders in your calendar, and then you shift teams and you don't follow that, and so on. And it's a really, really small thing, but that was the wow effect. Because as HR, and when you sit on the salary information, you can obviously have this information all the time. But for them, this was really a small detail that enabled them to be data-driven, if you like, to actually have that report up front when they log into the system. So even though it can be like, birthdays, but still, data was so unavailable for them before that, so they had to build these clunky Excel sheets or whatever to keep track of the birthdays in their team. Yeah.
Interesting. All right, tidy. I mean, so there is a lot of things going, and we see that, well, you have to have this and have that, and you have to build sometimes your own platforms. It costs a lot. And how can we justify investment in like deeper into people analytics?
Yeah. So as the previous speaker mentioned, it's about impact. And here is a real-world example that I would suggest, and also a couple of examples of things I think we should stop doing. So one company I know walked into the CFO's office and delivered, literally on a silver platter, just for effect, 90 million euros of budget back to the business, and said, "Here you go, you can use this how you want," because through people analytics and through workforce planning specifically, we've been able to reduce our variances or our budget fudge factor in the budget from 8% down to 3%, because we now better understand our attrition rates, our hiring rates, what we need for the business, the total cost of workforce, so we feel confident in delivering back to you $90 million that you can use amongst the business. That's real impact for the CFO. You want to make the CFO's day? Do that. a couple of words of caution that I would have on things that we should stop saying. A lot of times when I meet with people who are trying to do a people analytics project, they'll say things to me like, we want to have better data, or we want to save time, or we want to have more accurate reports, or we want to have cleaner data. Are all those things important? Absolutely. But I ask the question, how much is the CFO going to be willing to spend for each one of those items that I just mentioned? Probably not a lot. So when you want to really drive impact or ROI, put it in terms that the CFO and the CEO are really going to understand and appreciate, that help them achieve their goals, not just you achieving your own goals.
Good one. Absolutely. I'm going to be just quiet for 2 seconds. All right. And Björn, I'm thinking, I mean, from your perspective, you meet a lot of clients, a lot of companies. How are companies today utilizing people analytics to plan for the future state of the business? And I mean, whether that's personal or headcounts or skills or whatever it can be.
They don't.
They don't?
I would say.
Okay,
no.
Is there anything they do?
Yeah, well, they think they do. I think that's the problem.
Okay, explain that. Elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, but I think we've been covering it a little bit so far, and we'll obviously talk a lot more about it today. But it's about data quality, and when I came here today, I'm going to do a small presentation later on. And I thought that there will be so many people that are great at analytics here today, and I might present another perspective on it, and that is, can you actually measure people? When you speak about engaged employees, how do you define an engaged employee out in the organization?
Yeah.
Because I've been sitting in as a acting HR in management groups, and you see you have this succession plannings, for example, and you have like a scatter plot or something like that, putting out high potentials like this, and if you look at them year by year, they are just moving around, because 2 years ago this person was a high potential, now they're not. Why?
Yeah.
They're the same person doing the same job. Are they doing less? No, but I just feel it was more a thing of lifting this person instead.
Yeah.
So what's behind the numbers? What does it actually mean? And that's what I mean, that they think they do. But and I really appreciate what you have said. I think that's really true, that they need to answer these questions. What does it actually mean when you say we want to save time?
Yeah.
And how much time are you willing to spend to make that happen?
Yeah.
And who will save time, and for what? And what will we do with that time?
Yeah. Interesting. All right, so let's dig in a little bit into what you like, Tom, and what we mentioned a little bit. I mean, again, I work at Qlik, and one of the core things that why I was part of this movement is really to look at the predictive, see what you can. Of course, this is, again, I totally agree with you on the predictive stuff. But you have to make some assumptions always. And so how can company become more predictive? And what are the examples of predictive output that you see in the market that works?
It's a really good question. And as much as my previous answer about attrition is all about engagement.
You totally cut that one off. So.
Yeah, it is. And I do have that on my desk today to look at predictive analytics around attrition. It's something that we want to do. We want to try and understand it more and see how we correlate that back into our workforce. What are the precursors to somebody attriting from the business? I read somewhere that a company had looked at 3 items. Does the employee look at their contract online because they're checking what notice period they've got? Do they have a series of half-day vacations? And then there was a third factor, and apparently this gave. Am I on?
Yeah.
Apparently this gave the company a kind of 60-70% predictability that somebody was going to attrit. Hello? No? Hello? Okay. So it gave the company a 60-70% predictability that somebody was going to trip from the business, which is not bad, you know, and it's a great place to start. It's better than nothing. The descriptive stuff, I think, is much more interesting, where we see human behavior. And we can identify that human behavior. We had the example here of people moving around a talent box, so something like a 9 box. If somebody is moving from an 8 to a 6 or from an 8 to a 5, is there a reason behind that? Have they been in their role for X amount of time, they're becoming stale, they need a new challenge? Is it because they've had a number of different managers through you know, their life that is disruptive to their work? You know, there are so many things that you can look at, and actually that is also one of the pitfalls of people analytics and having the quantity of data that businesses are producing today, is that you can get sidetracked, bogged down into the detail that perhaps actually you're missing the bigger picture. So it's always good to take a look at these things, but come back out of it and take a high level view again of what you're trying to achieve. What was the original question and how are you going to answer it? I'm going to give a teaser, because actually predictive is one of the things I'm going to talk about in my session. So there's a hook there for anybody who wants to see a really good predictive scenario and use case. There's one coming.
All right. So Tyler, what are the best practices in driving the adoption of PA or quantifying the impact of PA internally?
Yeah, so I guess there's 2 questions there. One is around adoption, and one is around quantifying impact. So the one-liner that I think about when I think about adoption is simply this: that your people analytics strategy is only as strong as your change management plan. And the reason why I say that is there is so much good work that is happening in people analytics functions across the globe. But how is that actually affecting change within the organization? Because that's what people analytics is designed to do. It's designed to not just have your own personal insight, but it's designed to change the organization. And I find that when I talk with companies, they have a very strong strategy, or they got a strong journey or a roadmap outlined for what they want to do, but they oftentimes haven't thought through the real change management side of it and how they're going to help the business actually make better decisions. So the first thing I usually start out was, okay, love it, but tell me about your change management strategy on that. On the second element, as it relates to quantifying impact, here's a question that I would ask everybody, and you can think about this. Name me the top 5 metrics that your CFO and CEO are judged on.
Anybody wants
to take
the challenge?
Right? No. You don't need to. But that's, when we're thinking about quantifying impact, if you don't understand those 5, you don't have much of a shot at really quantifying valuable impact for the business, because most of the things that they're going to be looking at is filtering it through those items. And can I just go a quick example? So I mentioned in my intro that I've spent many years, the first 12 years of my career, doing analytics, but with finance and accounting and treasury. Let me tell you, they know how to make a business case really well. They know how to quantify impact. And they'll literally be in a meeting together and say, wow, this is really cool. We should do this type of analytics. We'll need this type of funding. Oh, we'll be right back. They have the privilege of walking down the office, talking to the CFO, speaking to his or her language, coming back and saying, okay, we got approval. Whereas oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes within HR, it can be a different story, where they're thinking, well, how are we going to quantify this quantify the impact to the CFO? And they're not as in tune as the finance team might be. So that's why I ask, do you know how your CFO is judged? Because that's going to determine impact.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I'm going to be quiet for a second. Good answer. Björn, I'm thinking about benchmarking.
Yeah.
So what does the future of benchmarking look like, and how can people analytics function maximize benchmarking, basically?
I think it's about going back to what the numbers mean, and I don't agree with everything that Tyler has said, because that's a quantitative approach.
Yeah.
And from university and forward, I've always been for the qualitative approach.
Yeah.
So, and I think this is what HR needs to do in the future, if we will be called HR, I have no idea, whatever the function will be called, if it will be called people and culture or whatever, is to actually introduce the qualitative approach to the CFO. And instead of following the CFO's lead that we normally do, kind of turn it around and say, hey, this is people we're talking about, you should follow my lead. The CFO should go to the HR and ask, what's your numbers? How do you crunch them? What's actually your measurement? And once we are there, if ever, then we can start talking about HR benchmarking, I believe.
Okay.
And it's really, really tricky business, because it's about comparing really, two different things. For example, when they compared Volvo and Saab in Gothenburg, when they both kind of went out of business, and when they compared the people, as you said before, on a macro perspective, they were engineers from the same schools, they lived in the same city, etc., etc. They were building cars, selling them to the same markets, but they couldn't work at each other companies. Yeah. And they just left it there. Because they were looking at it from a quantitative perspective, not a qualitative perspective, because it was obviously the culture that was the difference.
Mm. You want to weigh in, Tom, on this?
No, I think, I agree on both sides. It depends. It depends how you're looking at the data.
I think benchmarking has a very, very bright future over the next few years. I'm excited to see how it unfolds. In the past, the way that benchmarks have often worked is you have a series of maybe government benchmarks that are produced. You've got the Big Four who produce benchmarks. You've got Saratoga and other benchmark providers that are providing information. All very useful information. What I think is really interesting that's happening right now is with cloud and more data that's being held in the cloud on organizations, companies are now able to package that up. And as long as they have the right controls, as long as they have consent from the organizations, and as long as that information is properly anonymized, you're going to be able to compare organization to organization. So that way, you're going to be able to compare, if you're a pharmaceutical company, you'll be able to compare to another pharmaceutical company, anonymized items such as diversity ratios, manager ratios, resignation rates. And that gets you really granular to help you understand how you're comparing to your actual peers, rather than just from a general benchmark type of perspective. So I think that's going to be really interesting over the next few years.
All right. I want to thank all the three of you. Good. I've been kind of now a lot of new ideas. I hope you feel the same in the audience. You got some new ideas, some new perspectives. So thank you for being on the stage and talking about this.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you.